the Amazon of the electrical industry. How does that sit with you?
You have early prototype trying to convince everybody to use it. You also got to ask the question, how come this hasn't been done before?
Who was the biggest challenger to building out Remarcable?
The right number of humans to install the right amount of product at the right time.
Yep.
Wouldn't that be nice?
That'd be awesome. Not a problem solver, but efficiency generator.
Remarcable.com.
Yeah.
Spell with the C for cable.
Welcome to the Beyond the Breaker podcast.
Trained as an electrical and computer engineer. So kind of had a unique intersection of the knowledge of the electrical industry as well as computer programming. So that's kind of a little bit lead into what I kind of did in the past 8 years. But ultimately, I got an intern job with Southwire, who make cables. And over there, I built a system that allows them to automate the process to be able to create a lot of catalog specifications. And those helps contractors, when you go buy, especially on the higher voltage, medium voltage, you need, good specs in order to meet codes, right? So I helped them automate and build a website and, serving their customers. That's kind of how I got an introduction into the electrical construction industry.
Were you part of a team doing that? Was that kind of one thing that you by yourself were tasked with? Or what did that look like you said you were an intern?
Yeah, I was an intern. I was tasked to basically
seems like a lot for
compute.
If I'm not lying, but
compute, complicated characteristics of the cable. So those are like sequence impedance.
Okay.
Normal people don't talk about things like that.
Common terminology.
And so I was tasked to compute them, using whatever tools I was given. So instead of doing that, I wrote a program to do that, to automate the process so that I can do all of them very quickly. I actually did that in Canada. So the US, the main headquarters saw that. They're like, well, we want that too.
This is a good intern. Let's get more of that stuff going.
I like this guy.
But back it up just like a step or two further. You said you were studying EE, computer engineering.
Mm-hmm.
And when you started doing that, like, what did you think you were going to do from a professional standpoint?
Definitely not, working as in the construction industry.
Yeah.
That's definitely not the first thing. I thought, hey, I'm going to go to school for, a long time. And actually, I was actually thinking about doing something in the healthcare, to be able to build something that would, help solving some of the more difficult problems associated with health. I think when I was graduating, and actually studied biomedical as well, studying like MRI machines, ultrasound machines. But at that time, I kind of realized that that's a pretty narrow field and it takes a long time to advance and it requires a lot of funding to be able to do that.
Sure.
It's not like you can just start a company, develop an MRI machine.
No, I mean, there's so many like guidelines and I don't know the right way to say it, but like restrictions around creating medical devices, high-tech equipment.
Yeah.
They're not giving away those magnets. All of that stuff is huge capital costs. So switching from hardware, lean into some software, please don't take any offense, but like making it easy, right? As an intern, you're given this job and it's like, oh, hang on a second. I'm going to make this easy.
Yeah.
Got a better way of doing this.
Yeah.
So I think before we get into, a lot of the Remarcable stuff, that is what we want to talk about in your story and starting that, can you give, for the viewers and listeners, just a 1 to 2 minute overview of what Remarcable is? I think some people may be familiar with it, but what's the elevator pitch you give to somebody who's never heard of it?
Yeah, Remarcable essentially is a tool that helps the field users, in the construction industry to be able to procure the material they need on the job site on the digital platform, right, on the iPad or on their, laptop or phones, and also, be able to help in the office users to be able to process those POs, get pricing, availability, send it to the distributors, and finally processing the invoices for those, orders. So that's kind of in essence what Remarcable does, to digitize all of the process.
Yeah, and it's like a one-stop shop kind of thing, right? You have your iPad and it's I got everything I need there. So as the founder and CEO of it, how long was this an idea in your mind?
I started, noticing there's an opportunity when I was working at Southwire, seeing, how I interact with the sales team at Southwire, because that's, they got an interface with the contractors, right? And also seeing, talking with some contractors to understand some of the challenges. That's, I would say, probably about 8 to 9 years ago.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you kind of had the idea and went after it.
Yeah,
It wasn't
absolutely.
like you didn't wait a super long time. It doesn't appear.
No, I did not. So I see the opportunity. I saw the opportunity, and I feel like, did a little bit of research, right? Look up online and see how big the industry is, and really saw this as an opportunity that I can potentially make a little bit of impact. So I, jumped in with both feet and resigned from Southwire and started Remarcable. And for the first couple of years, it was just really nothing, right?
Yeah.
Because, shortly after I started, COVID hit. Everything is in
brutal time.
lockdown for about a good year and a half.
Yeah.
But in hindsight, that's also a blessing in disguise. I spent a lot of time to put my heads down and build the product and talk to the end users.
When you think about that impact, you said you did a little bit of market research to understand, what is the size of the opportunity out there, and maybe define the problem. Yes, you talked about like a novel, like better way of doing things, but like what was the problem and how big is that problem? Or was it, now that you're solving some of it, but like order of magnitude, some sort of scale there to help us understand.
Yeah. I want to say I had a lot of very insightful research, but that would be a lie. But what it is, I worked at Southwire. Southwire is a very big company, right? They do multi-billion-dollar sales every year. And they work with all of the big contractors nationwide. And I saw that, and I hear a lot from them talking, hey, typically you do procurement or sales processes via, phones and emails, taking picture of bill of material. And I just feel like, in this day and age, there must be a better way to do it. That's, the inner nerd engineer talking, right? And I just really assessed and, looked online and say, hey, electrical and construction industry at the time was, $200 billion industry. And a lot of that is material, right? About 35%, sometimes 40%, depends on the projects, is material. So that's a very big proportion of the project, and a lot of that has been done in a very manual way that hasn't really changed for decades and decades, right? And with all of the new modern technology, there has to be a better way to help all of these people doing their work easier, right? Because they already face a lot of hard things that they have to deal with, constant change, shortages and variations on the job site. So if we can, if I can take that piece, make it much more efficient and easier, then there'll be a better outcome.
Heck yeah.
For the job.
Yeah, and I think I've said it before in different ways in the podcast, but like as an industry, we're pretty darn stubborn. And I'm talking about the construction industry at large, not pointing fingers at any one place, but we have shown over a very long period of time, like many, many decades, we're not improving in efficiency in some places. We're not getting more productive in some places. And so when you start to attack this, 60 to 80 billion dollar opportunity, heck yeah, let's do it easier. Yeah.
I want to talk about your beginning days. So you make the jump, you say, hey, Southwire, I did all this for you, right? You brought it to the US, I'm out. You started out and it's just you. Right? And then COVID hits. Did you have a plan in place to say, okay, I want to get to here and then I'm going to start hiring? Or was it just like, let's just see where this goes and I'm going to figure out the business end after and growing this team?
Yeah. Again, I would like to tell you I had it all planned.
That was your opportunity to tell everybody that you did.
I had this magic plan and everything went great.
I mean, we would have pumped it up and be like, oh, yeah, this guy's got it.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of that is, making it up as you go, right? I think as any startup early stage, you just got to be able to stay nimble and pivot, right? And I think, we went through a lot of iterations on what Remarcable is and what Remarcable can do. And I think, looking back, it was definitely hard trying to figure out, build on what you just talked about earlier too, especially, you have early prototype trying to convince everybody to use it because it's by no means all thought out and ironed out as it is much more today, right? So, and that's obviously very difficult. And then you also got to ask the question, how come this hasn't been done before? Like, am I going down the path of completely wrong, and that's why nobody has done it before.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that as we were preparing for this today. It was like, well, this sounds remarkable in kind of streamlining and digitizing that material procurement process. It's like, this is kind of like table stakes. Why haven't we done this before? So what do you think were some of the obstacles why it hadn't been done before, or maybe even some of the obstacles you faced as you're trying to implement this thing?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, and there's definitely no shortage of that. As you mentioned, first of all, right, changing the mindset, because one comment I get a lot, at the beginning is, "Hey, we've made money doing this for decades. Why change now?" Right, and that's one mindset you got to be able to change, right? And then number two is we're trying to change a lot of the dynamics of how to do things differently using digital ways, right? And some of that can seem a little bit intimidating, for people involved, right? For example, we're asking suppliers to share pricing, availability, where none of them has done that before, right? It could come across, a little bit worried for some of them. Of course, looking back now after 7-8 years, everybody benefited by working together because of the trust between everybody.
But there has to be a certain leap of faith there, right? To be a little bit vulnerable, to say about your availability and your pricing. That's big stuff.
What was or maybe better asked, who was the biggest challenger to building out Remarcable? The contractors. I know you've talked about, the field was a tough one to get on board early, and rightfully so. It's changed to something that like, we have a schedule, we got to stick to it. This seems like it's a learning curve. What was the biggest challenge right away, as in like the most pushback? Who is that coming from?
I would say
not to call out individuals.
Early days, definitely the field, right? Because that's the first point. You can't automate the process if we can't get the field entering the information into a digital system, right? That's the first layer of cascading of efficiency gains, right? Because if you think about it, pre-Remarcable, single piece of material is getting entered at least 4 to 5 times. The field guys,
systems.
Yeah, field guys put it into a cardboard, send it to purchasing, translate it into an email, that's second, and then goes to distributor, third time, and the distributor sends back, AP gets entered one more time, right? That's 4 times already of the same piece of information.
Over the course of how much time?
Yeah, hours, days.
Right,
Yep, hours and
you got to
days.
assume at least a day.
Yeah, and that multiplied by, however
many times.
Yeah.
Something like
A lot
60
of material.
billion.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, the first obstacle, going back to your question, is to make sure that the system is easy enough for the field users to feel, hey, this is not only, easy to use, but adds value to me. Right. So what we kind of did there is a couple things, making the search super easy, right? Searching using the language the field speaks, the terminologies that they use, and then be able to add value by having, cut sheets and, catalog sheets right in there so they can quickly access, whereas it's much harder. And the fourth thing is having pictures because we're all, very visual. And especially, for apprentice, they may have never seen some of those pieces and parts. So having a picture there, knowing what you're buying is really important, right? So those are 4 pieces. That's really difficult to do because if you still go into, internet today, majority of the stuff still don't have a picture, right? It's still very hard to find the correct catalog. And it's still, very difficult to search for most of the products.
Like, take the opposite on that question too. The field folks were hard to convince in some ways. The vendors were hard to convince in some ways. Who was like the most eager for this thing? Who saw the most value right away, hungry to get after it?
Yeah, I would say certain, field users are because, once they kind of saw the prototype, the vision, some of them jumped on right away. But also, from, the leaderships of various businesses we work with, they kind of see the opportunity. Because early days, you kind of just got to believe in a vision, right? There's nothing is built perfectly. And so some of them did believe in the vision and to be able to work with me to kind of, work through the process and really improve and to build on that. And some distributors too. I'm actually very surprised some of them are very forward-looking because part of the value add we give is not only to contractors, right? We also help digitizing receiving orders and receiving quotes for distributors, right? So to be able to automate some of that process so that you can translate the information more accurately and more efficiently.
I love that. Thank you.
So I have a quote that was you told us. I manually entered the first 20,000 items in Remarcable. True or false?
Yeah. Absolutely.
I assume it's true.
Was a lot of work.
How long did that take you? And at what item were you like, am I doing the right thing here?
Yeah.
Or were you decided, I got to hire somebody?
I remember those days I was working 16 to 18 hours a day and 7 days a week. So it took a lot of time.
And so now, obviously, with a product that has grown so much, what does your team look like today? And I have a 2-part question, but I'll ask that.
We've really, grown quite a bit since COVID. We've been doubling every year since then. And so we actually just had one of our biggest milestones. So last month, we hit almost $1 billion in transaction in 1 month. We're working towards 100 people. It's still a very small team, but, hopefully we can continue to work hard and deliver, I guess, disproportionate amount of value.
Just so Ben heard that right. You said $1 billion in 1 month?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a bonkers number to think about the growth, and what that graph looks like over time. It's only been about 5 years, post-COVID era. That's substantial. Yeah. Holy crap.
The second part of my question was, now that, you go from entering in 20,000 items, you had the dream of what this product is. Now you're running a 100-person company. What has become the biggest challenge of that, or something that you didn't expect to have to deal with and really begin to understand what the whole business side of this is?
Yeah, I think, it's always easier early days that, I have full control of every outcome, right? Because that's me. I can tell me myself what I need to do. And I think as we scaled, it's always, you got to provision a level of overhead, right? Because there's communication and various different things, compliance and all of those other stuff that, you have to do to run a business.
Yeah.
So that's something, I guess I would never imagined at early stage how much of that requires to operate a business.
Yeah.
As you look into the future, we've talked a lot about growth, the genesis of the idea. But what are some of the next things that you see, and that can be specific to Remarcable and the digitization of that sort of workflow? It could be outside your team about some other problem you see. But what does the future and innovation look like from your perspective for the industry and Maybe start with material procurement.
Yeah, I think, one of the things I've observed, in the construction industry in relation to tech is a lot of the systems has been built very isolated and closed off. So it's very different than consumer world. Everything is connected, and you can, communicate a lot more and integrated. And I've, there's already a lot of companies starting to do that. And we're certainly a proponent of that. We make our APIs available to whoever wants to talk to it. So we can build an open ecosystem to allow the information to flow freely and be able to do much more cooler stuff, especially with the advancement of AI, and be able to incorporating and making better business decisions, right? Connecting Remarcable to your BI system and be able to draw more, business intelligence from that.
And when you think about that connectedness between the various systems, I would agree with you as a general comment. Like in the industry, we've had isolated solutions, whether it's separated by trade or role in the industry or things like that. Without giving away your next brilliant idea, like what are some maybe places you see that connectivity increasing? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think it's very similar to what we have done internally to solve the workflow of procurement, right? Going all the way from requisition to payments. And I think there's a lot of opportunities associated with, analysis, project analysis, management. There's opportunities for, integrations with, basically, billing and creating the, sales process incorporated into, as a contractor, right, working on small jobs or large projects. And there's just a lot of ubiquitous opportunity to be able to do a lot of those things, connecting all kinds of different systems with your HR system, right, and be able to really start to, do really cool stuff with AI too.
Sure. And I think I understand that pretty cleanly as it relates to like us as an electrical Division 26 sort of contractor.
Yeah.
Is there maybe some efficiency gain if you were to branch out into mechanical systems and product or other various systems and divisions within the industry? Can you see some connectivity there too?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, mechanical, electrical, MEP trades is always very interconnected, right? You're all on the same job site doing, different parts of the work. And I can definitely see, more coordination, when it comes to shipping, receiving, when it comes to, when the material is needed, because, one gets delayed, the other one probably will be too, right? So there's a lot of, opportunities to connect and, labor management softwares, right? To really be able to, putting things together and then really be able to
So you got the right number of humans to install the right amount of product at the right time.
Yep.
Wouldn't that be nice?
That'd be awesome. Yeah. Or somebody else does it for you. Kind of transitioning, the name Remarcable. What's behind that decision? Where'd you come up with that?
Yeah, it's this one comes up a lot because we get support emails for the little tablet.
Oh, okay.
There is a story why it's spelled with a C.
Okay. Yeah, well.
So, if you looked at it, it's actually a cable. That's where I came from Southwire. So a little bit DNA built into the name. And actually, our first groups of products is cable.
Yeah.
And also it's just a good sounding name.
Yeah, I think it is. And if it gets shown on the screen or people look it up, you can clearly see it's not spelled with a K.
I've been seeing the product, the logo, the name. I've been spelling it with a C for years now. And I'm a little embarrassed to admit, never once did it occur to me that that's like cable. Shame on me.
It was supposed to be rebar cable.
Blending in there.
Yeah.
So just building off that, was that something that you hemmed and hawed on for a while? Or were you kind of just like, in order for this to stick, this is it, and I got to figure out the product itself? didn't worry about it that much?
Yeah, I think it was pretty quick.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a quick decision. We haven't changed anything since I initially came up with it.
Because I know, there are companies that spend lots of money
Yeah.
on rebranding, whether it's a name, a logo, color scheme. So it's always interesting to hear the origin story of where it came from.
Nope, I came up with it, and I did go through dictionary though.
You got to make sure that it's not already chosen, like in a relative, position.
Yeah.
Clint, put on like your general entrepreneur hat for a little bit, and my hope is that there's somebody who's listening and watching this who's like, well, I got great ideas. I know how to do stuff. I have this thing burning inside me, whether they're a young kid or somebody who's seasoned and been dealing with the same problem for decades. What sort of initial encouragement or steps or conversation would you encourage them to have, around them to start to grow that thing from an idea, maybe eventually to a product or a thing?
Yeah, I would just think, I had lots of ideas too. I think even today, Remarcable as is probably a little bit different than what I originally thought. And I think what probably, worked is probably the ability to stick with it, right? I think if you have an idea, there's no better time than now to try it, right? And to be able to experiment, because things always fail, right? If someone tell you have a good idea and you go and try it, you're going to be successful, that's probably a lie. And everybody I know who started a company always took a couple of different iterations, and I think, and there, there's a lot of stories out there too, from successful companies of how they founded, and I think, definitely is to be able to, I would say, stick with it, right? The tenacity and really, believe in your vision, and that is really important, because it will take a lot of beating. And if you believe in the mission and really tries hard to deliver on it, I think there's always opportunity.
Did you have a mentor when you started this, or somebody that you were kind of hitching your wagon to a little bit for help?
Yeah, I had, I'm lucky to have a lot of people around me to be able to help me along the way. And a lot of them are actually people from the industry.
Yeah.
And that's something that I felt really, grateful. I think, I basically knew nobody. When I left Southwire, I only know a couple people from Southwire, but every interaction I had with all of the, our customers, literally, and they just opened their arms and let me in and really, show me how they run their business, what are the challenges they have, and really, help guide me through the process. And that's from a product perspective, but also, a lot of people along the ways that I've met, their friends that gave me lots of different tips. And podcast, right? Listen to tons of podcasts.
I was going to ask, was there something out there that drove the inspiration for this? Not industry related, right? Was there something you saw, you're like, wow, that's really cool. How could I do this for what I know? And that being the electrical industry or the product that I know.
Yeah, I definitely take a lot of inspiration from, successful companies and people. I listened to this podcast called Blitz Scaling by Reid Hoffman. Very good one. And
not as good as this, but probably is much better than this.
Yeah. So that's, heard a lot of different stories and, but yeah, no.
And that's sort of like inspiration that you've got there. You talked a little bit there about, you didn't name names, but like mentors, support that you got. It sounds like deep intrinsic belief in the thing that you were chasing, how you were doing it. You talked about mission and vision there. And I love hearing that. It's applicable a little bit everywhere. I want to throw a quote at you from one of our esteemed coworkers who may or may not have been on this podcast previously. Martin McAdams called Remarcable the Amazon of the electrical industry. How does that sit with you?
I think, what we're trying to do, and we're still trying to do now is to be able to create a experience for the user to be able to quickly identify, find what they need and, get what they need quickly, right? That's, I would say, the essence of what we're trying to do. And
Speed from what you see on the screen to having it in your hand so you can install that as part of your
exactly, and to be able to optimize, do all of the crazy things behind the scenes, to make that happen, right? And I think that's, I guess in a way inspiration because we all place lots of orders on Amazon, and over the years it became easier and easier and easier, right? And I think we're trying to definitely deliver the same sort of experience for everybody, doing their daily job in the construction industry.
That's fantastic. Clint, we happen to be at a company in the electrical industry that is a partner with Remarcable. If there's folks listening to this who, like, their teams might not be, what would you encourage them to think about or to look at to consider whether or not that would be a good solution? Whether they're a smallish mom and pop shop, maybe they've only got a handful of field craft workers, or maybe they're not even in the United States. Maybe they're in Canada or Mexico or somewhere else.
Yeah, I think, we have customers that, from a couple $1 million of revenue to $1 billion revenue. And I think the theme is the same, right? All of our customers are trying to do the same thing better and be able to improve and be ready for the future too. Right. I mean, AI is not going away, and all of the opportunities that's coming. Labor is getting harder. Right. There's increasing amount of job, not enough people to do those work, and to be able to future-proof the business, right, and to be able to optimize those efficiency gains. I mean, contracting is an incredibly hard business,
and it's hard everywhere.
Yeah.
Whether you're huge, whether you're small, somewhere in between, like. Totally agree with that.
Yeah.
It's challenging on all those fronts.
Yeah, and to be able to, find something to at least not worry about 25% of that problem and then focus on the other, part of the problem, that'd be a really good starting point.
I think that's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a great question, Ben, because part of what I was thinking of asking too is, how do people start using this more? Obviously, you guys have a great base. You have a lot of users. What are you seeing as, without going into too much detail, but like your goals to eventually, I think the idea behind this is like make life a little bit easier for contractors or for users. What are you seeing as things that you're approaching in the future to maybe make those things easier for people, whether it's, hey, you lost somebody on your staff and now you don't have as much time to do all those things. What are some of those items that you're kind of approaching with Remarcable?
Yeah, I think, the interesting thing is, and I see this every day, a lot of our customers come to us for different reasons, right? One customer might come and say, hey, we really wanted to be able to order better from the field, doing planning and getting everything better. Another customer comes to us, yeah, we really need to get our accounts payable a little bit better because we're typing every invoice. We can, automate that a little bit more. And over time, as they onboarded into Remarcable, we always see them converge to be able to picking up different pieces, right? Even though initially what they came to us is solving one problem, but then we keep expanding and helping to solve other problems that maybe they didn't even aware of or didn't think was a problem.
Yeah.
And I think to build on your question, there's definitely a lot of opportunities for us to continue to explore. And one thing that I've really, loved doing is to be able to stay close to our customers and talk to them. And I think every time I talk to each one of our customer, they always give me a problem to solve.
Well, and I think that was going to be part of my next question. Is like, do you feel like you're just a constant problem solver in a good way, right? For the good.
Yeah, I think we are. I mean, at the end of the day, I see that's how we create value, right? To be able to solve those problems in a meaningful way at a scale. And of course, it's going to be harder, because it's always easy to solve a problem, but it's hard to solve the same problem for everybody. And I think, we definitely have quite a few new things that's coming too, and to help optimize and connect even more dots in the entire supply chain, as well as to be able to bringing additional things in, to be able to really help optimize the workflows. And one example is, we've launched the tool app, I think about 3 years ago, and that really helped bringing the asset piece, right? Because every foreman, every electrician is going to need the tool to install the material, right? How do we make their interaction much easier so that they can track both of their tools as well as the material under one roof, right? So that's one example I would give.
Not a problem solver, but efficiency generator.
Yeah.
That's
Ooh, I like
better,
that's very quotable.
Said.
Clint, before we sign off for today, kind of the floor is yours. What else do you want to leave listeners with, whether that's a question for them to answer or some additional information you want to put on the table for them?
Well, first, appreciate the opportunity.
Heck yeah.
And I think, there's definitely, we're living in a really exciting age where a lot of things are happening, right? And I think, going back to kind of a little bit I already talked about, this is the time to really look forward and be prepared and, think about different process and how to do things differently. And really to be prepared for the future, because it's going to be fast and furious.
Right on. I appreciate that. A little preparedness would do us all some good that way. Clint, thank you so much for coming in, being a little bit vulnerable, talking about the journey, talking about the product a little bit, and helping me, frankly, understand a whole lot more about how the supply chain works within the industry and how big a problem that is.
Yeah. Maybe one last thing. How can people reach Remarcable? Right? What's the best way to, like, if they listen to this and are like, wow, that's something I really got to dive into, where would you direct them?
Type remarcable.com.
Yeah.
Spell with the C for cable.
Perfect.
All right. Thank you very much.
No, appreciate it.
Spell it with a C because
Spell with a
it's
C.
cable.
Not even close.
Not even close.